Hi, welcome to painting a portrait in oil colors using only ivory black and titanium white for highlights. This week's video was somewhat of an arduous task as I was babysitting my daughter who was home from school and try to record and paint at the same time. I'm going to do my best to explain the full process, how I generally approach these types of monochromatic studies, even though the video is sped up and some parts I sort of plan to do and fast forward. This will give you a general overview as to how I approach not only black and white studies like this, but colored ones as well. In this initial stage, we're mostly focusing on large masses. I am using a brush, but in no way I'm really drawing with it. I'm making marks, I'm measuring, I'm kind of free-flowing, and not really concerned about any particular detail. I'm almost filling planes in and at the same time letting the brush sort of dance around the surface. Here I'm introducing a tool that I use often. I've covered it previously. It's a Brayer, 1.5 inch, I believe this guy is. And it's a really useful tool for blocking in large masses. My approach was slightly different for this particular piece than some of the other ones that I've done, in that I wanted to establish the darkest darks from the get-go and sort of play off of that. I generally stay in the mid-range or mid-term with regards to the value as long as possible, and then establish the extremes towards the end. But for this particular piece, I don't know, I just wanted to have the darkest darks down and then play off of them. I think the one thing that I want to attain at this beginning stage is, as I said, to block in obviously large masses, but also just to get a feel for the space, the design. How do I like the way that the overall negative shape plays on the surface? I'm trying to make things as loose as possible and not look formulaic. Here I'm coming in and removing paint where the lights are going to be eventually positioned. Initially I planned on this being only a black or ivory black value study and have the lights of the canvas show through by me wiping it, as you can see here. But maybe the substrate was too absorbent, or whatever the case was, I wasn't able to get the contrast that I was after. So I did introduce titanium white later on. Here I'm using a tool that I use quite often with a lot of my color studies. It's a squeegee brush. I'm not even sure what the name is, but you can have sort of two sides. See, I'm wiping off paint with the longer side, and there's a smaller side. There's like a chisel with two sides to them. Here I'm bringing in this 1/2 inch flat to reestablish some features of the face. I am painting someone that I know, so I want to make sure that I don't lose the underlying drawing that I've established in the beginning. I mean, the process of adding paint and removing it, it's quite easy to sort of get lost, especially if you're doing it somewhat subconsciously. You want to keep track as to the features and where everything is. Here for the first time I am again reintroducing this Brayer. However, at this stage it's being used as a paint remover. That's one of the interesting features of this tool. It is extraordinary, as I said earlier, applying paint, but also when it's cleaned, applied to a surface and just sort of remove paint. It's not going to be entirely clean, but large chunks of it will come off, which if you want, you can certainly remove with a rag. You'll notice that the way that I hold these tools lend well to the style that I sort of have established, in that they're very loose. I hold them like you potentially may hold a comb, for example, and quite light in my hand. I'm at arm's length from the canvas. I always stand. Here again, as you can see, I'm holding that palette knife quite loosely. I'm making marks, I'm removing paint, I'm establishing some form of a beard, which will be in the light side. Here again, I'm removing paint. You can see on the left side there, that brayer is cleaned, and I'm making marks. At this stage, I felt it was prudent to establish some of the lighter tones, the lightest lights, and to see how they play off of some of the darks that were already in place. As I said earlier, I wasn't sure I was going to add titanium white, but I felt it was needed. You'll notice that the paint is being applied with somewhat of a dry brush. There's no medium, this is straight out of the tube, and it's being scumbled on. I'm sort of working it into the surface. The surface that I'm painting on is a gator board. It's a favorite of mine. I seem to gravitate towards it quite often. It's a sturdy board made of wooden veneer that has like a styrofoam center, and it's quite rigid and quite light, so it's quite easy to transport and retains its shape. The board itself can be primed with acrylic gesso like I just did right here, 3-4 coats, or an oil-based primer. One that I generally gravitate towards is the Gamblin product, although of course it dries slower, but it's a much slicker surface and easier to work with. I should have mentioned that I am using water-soluble oils for this particular study. I gravitate towards them more often than my other oil colors, which are Gamblins and Winsor and Newtons, just because of versatility and the non-toxicity component. Although the solvent that I sort of use often when I do use traditional oils is Gamsol, it still has some solvent inside it, and having kids and being cognizant of their well-being and mine, and I've just learned to use water-soluble oils in similar ways, and knowing their limitations, having worked with them for some time, is the key. They tend to be a bit more gummy, especially if you're using too much water, but there's very versatile mediums you can introduce. As I said, Cobra is the brand that I seem to sort of use most often. I do use Duo as well. I plan on doing a more comprehensive video on the limitations of water-soluble oils and how they compare with traditional oils soon. So do subscribe so you don't miss that. I'm constantly reevaluating where exactly different features of the face are compared to each other at this point. It's, as I said, supposed to be a realistic rendition of someone. I'm using various tools. As you saw, I was just wiping paint away. I'm also introducing a fan brush here. It's another tool of mine that's quite versatile. And a smaller brush now, just to sort of work in the features of the beard and the nose. I'm now going to introduce water. Interesting enough that I employ actually quite often as well for certain surprises, if you want to call them that. You can apply this at various stages of the painting just to introduce interest and to deepen the values. You can certainly attain very spontaneous and interesting drips as the water flows down the canvas. Here I just wanted to get some sort of like an aged look to the side of the face that's in the shadow, trying to paint. And then I just go over it with a clean brayer, which again removes paint, and whatever is exposed to the water will come out. What you're looking at here is day 2 of this painting. This was supposed to be a one-day prima study, as I've indicated, but I didn't like the way the design looked after sort of sitting on it and examining it that evening, and decided to work in the background a little bit more to give this painting a bit more of an anchor up top. I'm again reapplying the brayer with ivory black and removing paint again. Not really knowing what direction this is going to take me. This is deviating from my initial design, but that's just some of the joys of painting. It's not mathematics. Sometimes it works like you plan, and a lot of times it doesn't, but hopefully you grow through that process. And here you again can see that spraying method applied to a newly formed background, and you can kind of see this sort of starry night effect that you get by applying a clean brayer. Or you can just use a paper towel like I'm doing there and blend everything in. You can kind of see that the previous day's paint is not dry, but it's tack dry. You can see on his face I removed a little bit of it by accident with the brayer. But now I'm sort of bringing it all together with light, I don't want to call it a wash, but sort of blending with the brayer. And I'm trying to finish everything off now at this stage. I'm happy with the design. I'm again applying dry white titanium with that fan brush, the 1-inch, in a loose format. I'm just lightly coming over that surface. I'm knocking back some of these edges and applying the lightest lights. I'm quite happy with the result overall, even though I kind of deviated from my initial design for this particular portrait. It's quite possible using this loose style to attain quite a likeness like I did in this particular piece, or to keep things much looser and abstract. That's what you want. Here I've taken the camera off the tripod and I'm showing you some of the brush marks which are indicative of most of my work up close, and you can see the spatter marks, the scrapes, and the brayer marks, which are virtually everywhere in the background. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you picked up a trick or two. I plan on making these hopefully every week, so please do subscribe, and I'll see you on the next video.